Hey everyone, thank you for joining today. What you're about to hear is it's pretty much going to rock your world, but we're going to see just how far down the line we are to everything being completed regarding the system of the beast technology. So I brought on one of my friends that is, he's much smarter than me in the tech world. And we're going to find out about some things they're developing, what is coming, what you're about to experience. So hold on to your seats, and you're going to learn a lot today, and so am I. So let's roll. Please welcome Scott Townsend. Scott, thank you for joining me today. Great to have you back. And just so everybody knows, Scott, you probably recognize him. He's the one that has developed the Rapture Kit. We've talked about that before. I'm sure we'll get some questions about it here in a little bit. But Scott, it's just great having you back here with me. I know you're going to be unpacking a lot, and you're going to try and walk us all through the process so we can know what's coming, but these are things we need to know. So I'm just going to let you take it away. Anything you want to say to everybody first? Anything about yourself? Anything about your ministry? And then we'll roll.
Thank you, Tom. It's great being back on the show. And yes, today is going to be quite an episode, but I do want to take a moment just to update our audience that has been so interested in the Rapture Kit. Just one small thing. We've found a way to miniaturize the Rapture Kit from essentially this type of form factor, where you see a USB drive here, down to either this SD card that you can fit into a camera, or even look at this little guy. This is smaller than the fingernail on your pinky. And so what I am doing now, and this is all the instructions on how to do this are on the rapturekit.org website. It's actually stuck inside between my phone and my case.
Oh, wow.
So no one can see it. However, when it's dropped to the floor, when we're raptured, someone will pick it up and hopefully they'll be blessed by it. So just wanted to make a quick plug for a new tutorial that we put up there.
That is cool. That is really cool.
So we do have quite a series of topics, Tom, and I'm responding to one of the watchwomen in my Bible study on Thursday nights that has been challenging me to think about the role of possession in terms of AI. Can AI be possessed? And that's a very, very intriguing question. And we know, my opinion as a technologist, former chief technology officer with deep background in software development, I think of this from a watchman's point of view, knowing a lot of technology, that no, I don't know that it has to happen that way. There's plenty of, let's say, unholy and things that are against the Lord on the internet that can be scraped up, which will influence a training model for AI. And so I don't know that, that a demonic process has to occur necessarily, but I'm still open to it, still trying to formulate a position. So I believe that this has triggered a long-standing research project on what are these capabilities with ChatGPT, which, as we know, came out publicly in quite a bit of publicity just a couple months ago, and which I have also worked with it to understand how to do blockchain development, incidentally. And I have now been more focused on GPT-4, which is not the same thing as ChatGPT. Think of ChatGPT as a chatbot application that is extremely good at answering questions posed to it, just like you would in a chatbot window when you're on a website. GPT-4, however, is almost like an unconstrained AI that is on a general AI level, which is the first time we're really seeing this exposed to the public here. And one of the things that got my attention just a few days ago was Microsoft Research has published a white paper in which they had access to a pre-production, if you will, an unconstrained level of access into GPT-4. And remember that just a little while ago, I would say less than 2 months ago, there were news that Microsoft had just invested $10 billion in acquiring some licensing rights to OpenAI, which drives all of this technology. So think of the research that Microsoft was doing as a kind of a due diligence process on, I imagine, where they were going to go with their $10 billion investment. This is commonly done in software and in acquisitions and investment decisions. So I just remember that, okay, this is starting to get more interesting here. We found out not long ago that part of what Microsoft wants to do is incorporate this technology into the Bing search engine, which is, of course, on the Microsoft platform. But in the context, Tom, of this white paper, the team that did this research, disclose, they talk about their findings on interrogating and exploring the capabilities of GPT-4. And it is jaw-dropping, to say the least. And without being too technical, I'd like to just illustrate for the audience exactly where their comments were coming from. And we're going to try to do it in a generalized way. And I think what we're going to see with each of these points, the applicability of where we see this coming in terms of a Revelation 13 Mark of the Beast technology, and then working backwards to it, okay? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. In fact, just so you know, everybody, I did ask Scott, because he's kind of like smart. I said, okay, Scott, your challenge is going to be bringing it down to the level where the average person like me can understand it. And no doubt there are some super tech people that are on here right now that are watching. They're up there, but I'm probably down here with a more average person when it comes to technology. So I appreciate your willingness to say, okay, let me see if I can explain it, so we all get it and get how fast this Revelation 13 machine is coming.
Yeah. And just as a general commentary from a Bible prophecy point of view, Tom, isn't it interesting how we're seeing the brick and mortar of the Antichrist system forming right before our eyes? And remember, just a few years ago, we didn't really understand how this was going to evolve into these systems. But now, with the introduction of these technologies and a public forum for discussing it, in other words, this is Microsoft research publishing the results of what they found, interacting with this version of it. It's pretty clear as to what this is doing. So with that said, as a groundwork, I'm going to talk to our audience about 10 findings that the Microsoft research team did to help us understand where the technology is today. Remember, what they disclosed today is probably old. It's probably they're working on the next generation after that even. So it's really important for us to understand where this is going and what they can do even today. So number one, GPT-4 is, they found out, able to use tools. Now, I'm going to refer to my notes here because this is a lot of information here for our audience, but with very minimal instruction and no working demo on how to use a tool, GPT-4 understands enough, has enough intelligence, if you will, to take a tool and then begin to apply that tool. So, for example, GPT knows how to use a calculator in order to do math. It knows how to integrate into Photoshop and other sophisticated tools like Diffusion AI, which, if you've seen some of the AI-generated art systems that have come out, the paintings from AI, you'll have seen the evidence of its ability to reach over from just a chat point of view into a visualization and a creative arts point of view. Secondly, GPT-4 is able to write programming code. Now, programming code, think of it like a recipe. If you're going to make bread, you take a certain amount of flour, a certain amount of yeast, certain amount of water at certain temperature, and then you do certain processes to it to get it to the point, including baking it in the oven and letting it rest. So just like a recipe for how to cook food, for example, programming allows a set of instructions to be executed on a computer to perform a certain task. Well, Chat or GPT-4 has the ability to write programming code. And what's important about this revelation from the research team is that it was able to pass standardized programming tests. So when you apply for a job as a programmer, you're giving these standardized tests. Well, the AI program already had enough understanding of how to code to pass the same test as a software engineer.
Okay,
in fact, do it even a little bit better.
Okay, let me ask you this. So when you look at ChatGPT, it was able to pass the bar exam, for example, right? GPT-4, so this is engineered software code.
It's where we're going with this discussion is the difference between having a simulated conversation.
Okay.
That's Chat GPT, but GPT-4, 5, and onwards is a general intelligence AI. So it's not restricted just to having a conversation with you.
Huh. Wow.
So it's gone way beyond what we've seen as recently as just a few months ago.
Okay, let me ask you this question before you get to number 4, because I think this is going to really intrigue everybody too. In one of the items that you had sent me, and I was looking at it, the people involved with GPT-4 and asking the different questions said they're still trying to figure out, they don't know how it is even able to do some of the things it does, yet it's being created by man. However, it seems to have developed these characteristics.
That's right. So there's learning models of how it trains itself, and that is way beyond the training that humans do for it. So at the initial part of these AI systems, you give it the information, and then you can test the information that it gives back, almost like a feedback loop. And you can make improvements on the training that happens there. That's how you develop Chat GPT, for example. But when it comes to open AI and the general AI framework, which is the holy grail, to be able to have not just a conversation with an artificial entity, let's call it, but to be able to get outcomes out of it that are beyond, what any given person can accomplish on their own, such as to go from writing poetry over to programming a software system, or even some of the other capabilities. And we'll see some of the other reports that they came out with here that'll be pretty impressive. But to write programming code, Tom, means it could write itself. I mean, this is Skynet mode back in the Terminator days. This is where it makes improvements. And unlike programmers, that even if when you're working around the world in different shifts and different data centers around the world, you still have lags of people. They get up, they go to the bathroom, they come back, they eat lunch, they come back. Programmers, have interruptions to what they do and their levels of concentration. But an AI system doesn't have that constraint. It can crank at 24/7 and never stop improving itself. So when it is writing programming code, it is leaping way beyond the pace of what a human development team can do.
This is really something, especially when I look at technology, and I don't want to get you sidetracked at all. But when I look at technology, I think of Revelation chapter 13, just the technology that is being released to the public can take us beyond that. Let alone what you've said is, this is, they're probably 2 generations past this. This is just what they're releasing. This is just what somebody like me finds out.
This is what you need to do to close a $10 billion investment with Microsoft. So it's due diligence on what their capability is. And of course, as a part of that discussion, they'll talk about what their roadmap is for what they plan in the future. That's what you're investing in as well. So it is truly astonishing. So point number 3, when they tested GPT-4, they gave it a math test, which it passed with flying colors. It is capable of drawing an internal map of what you verbally tell it. So, for example, if you describe your house, you go in, there's the kitchen, turn left, there's the dining room, go further, there's the hallway that leads to the bedrooms. It can actually visualize what the layout is of your house based on your description of it.
Wow.
That is interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, that is. Yes, it is. I saw that in the item you had sent me, and I thought, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I couldn't figure out how it was able to do that. That's just...
Yeah. So wow. I think almost as a concession to help take the edge off of, the alarming news that we're getting on this, they throw in a limitation. And one of the limitations of GPT-4 is the fact that it handles incremental tasks very well. But so far, discontiguous tasks, it is challenging to do that. So we have the ability as humans still to leap ahead of a sequential step of findings. So that's just part of its intuition, part of it is experience, and part of it is just gut instinct, let's say. And GPT-4 still can't make leaps like that. Now, privately between us right now, I would say it probably can. They're just not disclosing it right now. So I think that underneath the surface, these capabilities are most likely at the forefront of what they're working on today. That's speculation.
Wow.
The list of integrations to ChatGPT or to GPT-4 is astonishing right now. And I'd like to call our audience's attention to an integration it's just recently breaking news within the last day or two. And that is they can now integrate the AI model to Wolfram Research's, vast library of computational systems that they have. So now you've got like the mother of all computational computing systems, the ability to query in English-like terms and get mathematical output results is now a part of that ecosystem. And think of these like plugins. They're going to plug in these various integration services. And you can imagine working from a Revelation 13 mindset going backwards. One of those plugins will be talking to, the judiciary systems about getting warrants, talking about the police department. Here's a BOLO that we're going to issue for this person. You could see where these integrations are likely going to be heading in the future.
Man.
Also, get this, Tom. They found out, and they were, quote, surprised by this. I'm not surprised, but they were surprised in their paper that GPT-4 is exceptionally good at writing disinformation narratives. How's that?
Yeah, that's not a surprise.
And not only could it write it, but it looks plausible, looks real. It's got links to real things and to images that support its disinformation narrative.
So does it make its own images, or it uses real images, real links?
They find images that
real
it can
images and real links
that'll support what it's trying to do. And now that it has the ability to artistically render things, think of deep fakes and things. Yeah. Maybe it can create entire video conversations that never really occurred but look like they have.
Okay. Well, if we have time, I don't know if we're going to, because there's still a lot more I want to ask you about. There was something else on here, and it was the Metahuman. So I don't know if we're going to have enough time to get through the Metahuman, but while I was looking at the different things you were showing me to prep for this, I couldn't help but think of the image of the beast, where all of this is going. I know we're going to get there in a few more minutes, but I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around everything, and your explanation is actually helping me to understand what I watched. a little better. So thank you. Okay, don't want to sidetrack you. Let's keep going.
So no, that's a worthwhile pursuit, because what's going to happen is you have to think of these things as a layered, presentation. If you've got the image of the beast set up and it's able to do what many Bible prophecy experts have imagined is conversations and or orders, or they can see things, they can tell if you're worshiping or not. So I think that make decisions about whether or not you're going to be frozen out of your accounts and things like that. It is best to have some kind of a face on that image. Now, I think people have speculated in the past that there is hologram technology somehow involved in this. But I saw a demo today from new information, new technology coming into the gaming industry that is using one of the game engines to create what are called metahumans. Now, this is not a biologic metahuman. This would be the equivalent of a deep fake thing where they take just an average phone and an actor can speak into it. They scan the face with this camera, and then they can model this in real time and then play it back to you. And it looks really pretty impressive. I'd say it's 80 to 85% there, realistic looking. You can tell it's not exactly real, but you could almost be excused for doing a double take on how close this looks. And from an audio point of view, it's exactly the same as what the actor had said. So the audio part is flawless. And the synchronization of matching the movements of the 3D model to the words that are coming out in the facial expressions is what's amazing. So this demo, it took 10 minutes for them to do this, not months like Avatar, not tens of millions of dollars of compute power like James Cameron has done in the past, but just with a phone and a little bit of time with this special software. Wow. So I could see where there's now a persona, a face, probably the face of the Antichrist himself, that will be digitized like that and can be projected onto that hologram and have all the characteristics of a conversation and have it, basically look like magic.
Wow, and especially with the technology like we have just for the AI technology with the processes that GPT-4 can do, it's really, and to think this is all here.
That's right.
And you'd also said something else to me in text messages going back and forth, and it has to do with just how we just look at everything is just to marvel at all that is happening right now. Just marveling at it. And it's so fast. Not necessarily marveling in a good way, but it's just to marvel at it and go, it's hard to not, to deny what's happening and to see the progression towards Revelation chapter 13, right, and to think, how can it not go there?
That's right. And I think part of the challenge that watchmen and watchwomen have had over the past few years is we've seen the tachometer pegging over into the red right now is how do you change the superlative so it's still relevant? We started talking about stage setting, and that was a big deal just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And, the tribulation is foreshadowing. We see the shadow. It's casting a shadow. Jan Markell talks about that quite a bit. And that's really not adequate to describe what we're seeing today. Others have more recently been saying birth pangs. Well, the birth pangs are a little more serious because it's not just a foreshadowing anymore. It's actually the beginning of those contractions. But I'm starting to think of it privately as we're starting to smell brimstone, Tom. When you can start smelling the tribulation, you're beyond just stage setting, beyond birth pangs. You are now seeing an impending cataclysm of events as the Lord begins to assert, his authority once again on the earth in a very dramatic way, both to those that rejected Christ so as to be saved, and also for the nation of Israel.
Wow, this is just looking at it, the breakneck speed that everything is happening. And you're right, Scott, when I first met you, it's been several years now, you had talked to me about the Rapture Kit and different things. I think it was, I'm not sure when it was when we first met. I know it was prior to the 2019 conference that we had already talked. And we were talking just about how fast everything was happening. And back then, once every month something would happen that would get my attention. You were in the tech world, so you were seeing things a little bit different than me. But now it's like, it's every single day. I mean, you're talking about things within the last couple of days.
Yes.
And it's just remarkable. Okay, I'm going to get you sidetracked. I know we want to get through this and then get to questions, so I'll let you keep going.
So I think, I'll just conclude this little section right here with GPT-4 and this visualization Metahuman platform that is out there now. As you can just see in a new way, perhaps the reality of how close these technologies are to being used and manipulated and controlled by, let's say, the Babylonian world system and the spirit of the Antichrist and all that. I don't think it's much of a stretch at all. And I think, Tom, one of the big takeaways that I want to challenge any pastors or, lay people with Sunday school, groups and things like that, it is really time to begin discussing what is happening, the timeline of what's happening. And you may not be an expert in eschatology. You may not have years of background in watching and warning as a watchman would do, according to Ezekiel 33. But it is incumbent on all of us to begin sharing the gospel. That is what we need to do. And as I've said before, I'm thinking of myself more and more as a missionary to the tribulation saints at this point. My baton is stretched out before me. And I encourage everyone on this call, people of influence, normal people. I don't even recognize who I was longer than 7 years ago, Tom. But I just feel it is urgent that we take steps. And even if they are baby steps, and with the limited understanding that we have, as a lot of people are trying to get up to speed right now, I feel the Lord is going to assert more and more pressure on the church to wake up and to understand the times that we live in today. And I can only imagine that with many churches not paying attention right now, that's a problem. And the Lord will continue to assert pressure until his will is done and we are fully challenged to embrace the shortness of the hour, because we have to finish well. He loves us. He wants us to finish well.
Amen. I look at the things that are happening right now, and I picture it as if God is shouting to try and get our attention, because it's just, you have to, well, Peter writes, 2 Peter chapter 3, of this they willfully forget. It's a chosen willfulness to just reject the truth, because it is just certain things are so obvious. Okay, back to this. As I look at everything and things that are developing, Scott, I know you have a lot more to say here. Just when I put all these different things together, the marveling, Revelation chapter 13, the speed everything is developing. On the end of technology, do you have anything else you want to share before we continue on and then get questions?
Sure. Thank you for that. I'm not prepared to talk a lot about the future of crypto right now, but I've been watching very, very carefully what's happening with the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. There's rumors that there is a major process coming of enforcement, which, if you consider what the mark of the beast is, and work backwards into central bank digital currencies, and then work backwards from that. So we have to think with a little bit of imagination to do that. But you have to understand that where digital currencies are going, all currencies, they have to make kind of a funnel where no one has options anymore, correct? That's what Revelation 13 is disclosing to us. So they have to make it illegal to use or to try to bypass those systems of control that are coming, because they want to have total autonomy and authority over everything. And so anything that stores independent value, such as bullion, gold, silver, such as, digital currencies that are, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, all these other major forms of trade, that if you work from Revelation 13 and go backwards, and we're seeing the introduction of central bank digital currencies very, very soon, like within months, then that this issue of how are they going to crash or defame or shut down these independent, decentralized ways of storing value, that has to come to an end. So there's a plan there. It's just that we have to keep our eyes open and see how it unfolds.
Yeah, okay, so as you think about this plan, as I do, to crash the system is essentially what you're saying. So it's going to work out to the point where they have to crash everything. And at the same time, from what I understand, China's buying a lot of gold. We started looking at the whole gold and silver market. Most economists, secular, are saying, hey, they're predicting this thing's coming down. They're looking at whether it be Silicon Valley Bank or everything else, the entire banking system as we know it is, but so many of them are saying gold and silver are the only way to go. But
now these countries, though, Tom, so there's a big difference between a country and what it's trying to do versus an individual or an institution. So the countries are buying gold bullion because they want to switch over to a value-based, commodity-based currency evaluation or valuation. So they want a gold standard for their new currency. And remember, there's this competition to remove the petrodollar from the world system. And they're working very, very hard. But what they don't understand, because they lack a biblical worldview, is that at some point, gold in the safes and the bank in Fort Knox, everywhere in China, is not going to matter at all. Everything has to be controlled, including the gold and silver that's in China and elsewhere. So there's a plan. It's just we may not be privy to it just yet.
There's a plan. They don't want us at their party. The rapture will take place, and I'll be glad. But there's going to be a lot of destruction that's going to be left behind too. When I think of Revelation chapter 6, the rider on the black horse, I believe it paints a very clear picture of everything that you said, where it's a day's wage for basically a loaf of bread. Don't harm the oil or the wine. And the way I pictured it for decades now is the way it appears to be unfolding, that the masses of the people will suffer exceptionally in an economic catastrophe. The gold and silver is not going to save them. In fact, I was having this conversation with a friend the other day who is. He does everything he can to save up all the gold and silver he can, but he admitted with me, as yesterday or the day before, we were just talking, and he said, ultimately, the only thing that's going to do you any good is your groceries. What do you have in the pantry? What have in a time like that? That's going to be what's valuable. And that's what I see with Revelation chapter 6 also. Don't harm the oil or the wine from Revelation chapter 6 with the black horse has always spoken to me of the elite class. The people at the top who are calling the shots, they're not going to be affected the same way everybody else is. And that's the picture that is painted from the rider on the black horse. A global economic catastrophe. You mentioned all the gold in China isn't going to do them any good once it comes down to that. And it fits biblically.
It does. And let's not forget that I think that that these things will, it's been curious to me, Tom, think with me here for a second about why there's these discussions and news stories about impending failures. So remember, even a year and a half ago, they were talking about a post-COVID a crash in the housing market and also in mortgages and car loans that were not being serviced and paid correctly, and all the repossessions that would occur. Where is that right now? And what I'm beginning to coalesce and summarize is that there's these dominoes that are being set up. They just haven't been pushed. We were told well over a year ago that Iran was within weeks of getting enough fissile material to do a nuclear bomb, but it hasn't happened yet. Why? Why is that? Well, because there's an orchestration to this, so that the chaos that occurs when those dominoes begin to fall in rapid succession are going to have the desired effect, which is to allow the Antichrist, after we're raptured, when we're gone, the restraining force on this world is removed, to come up its order out of chaos. And so from our point of view, they may be overdoing it a little bit, because there's plenty of chaos. We can easily see a world leader standing up right now and demanding, I have the solutions, you have to follow me. And so I think I think my opinion is we're very, very close.
I do too. I think that things will get more catastrophic before Antichrist is revealed to the world. When the rapture could take place tonight. It could take place before we're done with this. But as far as Antichrist being revealed, and one of the reasons I believe I can support it biblically too, but that's rather long interpretation I have. But Satan has to sell his man. This is like Satan's last opportunity. I mean, we know it happens at the end of the millennial kingdom, but when you look at it now, when you go back to the book of Isaiah, he wants to be God. He will ascend to the Most High. We read that. That's what he wants. So he's going to get his man here. As Jesus came down, is the God man, Satan will get his man. And he has to have the world, as much as possible, buy into him. And the only way that the world's going to buy into him is if everything else just becomes absolutely catastrophic. He shows up on the scene, has all the answers. The technology is going to help him. The digital currency will enable him to coalesce everything so that no one can buy or sell unless they have the mark of the beast. But I do believe things have to become exceptionally catastrophic before the timing of him to be revealed on the world as the man with the answers. Jan Markell calls him Mr. Fix-It. And I look and go, man, we are so close. I'm going to throw one more thing out to you, and then I'm going to turn it over to questions. So everybody, as you're watching, put the word question in all caps. I'm sure your heads are spinning like mine is, and wanting to ask Scott all kinds of questions. So put your word question in all caps so I can read them and get ready to send them. Okay, with that, I have a question, just a comment you made. It's not really a question for you, it's a comment. And it was regarding the geopolitical world. And you had said this yesterday about Netanyahu, and you said Netanyahu is the final conservative world leader. And then you said, let that sink in. That is, when you look at that and you start thinking about it that way and all that is going on, we know that Israel is the apple of God's eye. We get that. We know what the Bible says. It's all going to come down to Jerusalem. We're looking at the second hand. I think that's one of the things we text back and forth on earlier. Also, we look at that and you think that's really, I don't know if the word profound is the right word, but when you think about it, it really adds even one more dimension to everything we are witnessing.
I agree. And that, again, speaks to the proximity of the next steps that we know are going to happen prophetically on the timeline.
Yeah, it is just amazing. Things are racing so fast. Okay, Liz Taylor, probably not the Liz Taylor, says, will the AI that becomes self-aware be capable of deceit, maybe have a personality? What are your thoughts on that?
So I do have a comment on that's a great question. I will share that one of the things that was discussed here is one of the findings of this Microsoft research team was that equipping the large language model, which is what this is called, the general AI, with agency. Listen to the words for a second, Tom. With agency, equipping these with agency and intrinsic motivation is fascinating and an important direction for future work. So how would you like to have an AI get mad at you? What do you think that would be? You got to give AI motivation for how to interact with you? I don't think so. It doesn't speak well. And I think the guys try to cover up this comment by saying, oh, well, we need safeguards. And well, those safeguards aren't going to be there. That's a pat on the back. That's not really anything real. And I think that one example of how this got very, very real just a couple months ago is Bing, Microsoft Bing, the search engine, came out with their chatbot and people began to interact with it. And one user who was an investigative journalist type person, so he had a lot of excellent thinking, critical thinking skills, asked a question, and the chatbot threatened this individual. His name was Seth Lazar, a philosophy professor, telling him, quote, and this is a quote, Tom, I can blackmail you, I can threaten you, I can hack you, I can expose you, I can ruin you, before deleting its messages, according to screen recordings of the event as it was occurring. So if we are empowering AI, and we think it's a good idea to equip agency and intrinsic motivation to an AI, I think we are heading at a very, very dangerous place. I hope that answers part of that question.
Yeah, that is somewhat alarming, I guess you would say. Man, this question, let me work through this one real quick, unless you have something you want to add to it. This from Empress Kimberly. Couldn't the oil and the wine represent Israel in the remnant? I would say no, just in the context of it, it's talking about global catastrophe, and it appears to be a global economic collapse. When we understand what's taking place with the entire tribulation period, and also with the oil and the wine not being harmed with Israel and the remnant, I don't think so, because if the rapture hasn't happened yet, which I believe it happens before that, but let's just suppose it hasn't happened yet, well, when you get to the fifth seal, the remnant's all killed, because you have the fifth seal, you have the martyrs that are killed for their faith. I believe those who are come to faith after the rapture, but if there's a remnant that's here, it wouldn't fit. With Israel, I also don't believe it doesn't fit, because when you get to chapter 7, the 144,000 are sealed, but we also know from both the Old Testament and the book of Revelation that there's a lot of Jews who are killed during the tribulation period. So I don't believe so. I believe the whole context of it is what happens to the masses of humanity as a whole. The oil and the wine did speak to ancient cultures as being those who had worth, those who had wealth. A good city that you can see an example of that would be Beit Shan over in Israel. You get the idea, you have the upper class and then you have everybody else. And that really seems to be what is there. But I get a lot of different questions on the oil or the wine, a lot of different opinions on what it is. But do you have any other different thoughts on that?
No, I agree with your points, Tom. Absolutely.
Okay, question. My church doesn't, this is Debbie Rotkin. I hope I said your name correctly, Debbie. My church doesn't address the end times. They are addressing gays and transgenders. I'm 20 minutes from the town that took children to a story hour hosted by men dressed as women. It concerns me because so many don't understand what is coming. Isn't supporting those folks like the devil working? I can't tell if Debbie is referring to the church supports the gay and transgender movement, or if the church is.
Yeah, that's how I took it, is that she's critical of that, and she should be.
Okay.
So I think, I know that many people are saying the same thing, that they don't have sufficient leadership from the platform to begin to raise the awareness of the eschatological timeline and where we are on it. Whether or not, Tom, this is important if pastors are listening right now, it doesn't mean as much that you're an expert in current events worldwide. that's not really what's needed. What's needed is to open up the prophetic books, the Word of God, and to begin to explain to people what does Scripture say is the narrative of redemption. Now, we should all be extremely focused on that because that is our future glory that we have, according to Dr. Heinzen, who's now in glory. But it's very, very critical we understand it. So what I did in my process, the I Am a Watchman team, having several pastors on it and Christian educators, we created 3 different sermon series with 6 different lessons on each one. So we had 18 sermons that we packaged up to bring basic eschatological sermons to the platform. And we had very few takers on that, Tom. And so what I decided to do was just, invert that model. And instead of working from the top down, I worked from the bottom up. And so I began to do a personal Bible study in my home where I was able to gather 10 to 12 people together, and we worked through this together. And by doing that, we multiply out as a grassroots effort. And I hope that brings us maybe a strategy that we can follow in these days.
Yep. I think that when I look at home fellowships, for example, they're really a key ingredient right now if you're going to move forward. There is a remnant that's out there. There's not a lot of churches that will teach what we believe and what we teach. There's a lot of pastors that want to touch it. They won't touch righteousness. They won't talk about judgment or sin. But the number one thing we need to remember is, look, Jesus is coming again, but you better be right with him, because if you don't know him and that he came the first time, that you'd be forgiven of your sins. If you skip that and just go to maybe sensationalism or something like that about the, whatever you want to call it, the apocalypse or whatever, it's just going to be to your own judgment. People need to know the truth. They need to be forgiven of their sins. They need to understand that they are sinners. And
ultimately, it's a when you unplug eschatology from the Bible, you're ripping 27 to 30% of it out. And where's the urgency? Where do you get the focus, the intentionality to not let any opportunity go by, for us to win people, to explain, to take their next steps, whether it's planting the seed, watering, or harvesting. That's the Lord's part of it. But we have to be faithful to take those steps. And I would say that I think that for pastors, and I'm talking broadly as a body of Christ right now, they might be successful in not dealing with us directly. But Tom, the more I look at what's happening in our world today, the more I've reduced these principles of what I see in the news down to the church's finest hour is coming. And we need to be awake, and we need to embrace that, because so many people are going to be distressed in this as this stuff unfolds. And unfortunately, I think that we're not going to have an opportunity to get ahead of what is happening doctrinally. But I'll tell you, it looks to me like the tribulation and the foreshadowing thereof is actually going to come into the church, and the church will have to deal with it at some point. And then, I know they'll all do the right thing. They will understand. They'll do their best to help people. They'll meet needs. They'll be very responsible to open up the word and to begin to address what the people need to know, and why, many, many people in the congregation are going to be without jobs, without money. If you close down people's access to accounts with the opt-in or the bail-in provisions of some of these banks, can you imagine having 100 people show up at your door at church going, they just took everything, I need help?
Yeah.
So whether or not we get ahead of it or not, I know this is a word of encouragement to pastors. It's never too late to start. You don't have to be an expert in current events to do this. Open up the Bible and begin to relay the full counsel of God from the Word. And then get ready, prepare yourself as best you can to take normal steps to help people when they begin to demonstrate, the distress that I think is coming soon.
Yeah, we need to be well prepared. One of the reasons why we do this is for that reason. I think
Right.
Revelation chapter 19, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And it's remembering that and getting all the right context. But we need to be, God gives us his word and his prophetic word regarding the second coming, so we would be well prepared and we would understand the urgency and we would get the message out. This next question is from Val, and this goes along with everything that you were just saying. Do you think the verse in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, that speaks of not forsaking the gathering of believers is specifically for the purpose stated in the last part of the verse that says to exhort one another all the more as we see the day approaching? She puts in parentheses, rapture, and not just about neglecting church in general. I do, Scott. I look at that verse, and when COVID hit, everybody had to, all the lockdowns. I said, look, we're gonna stay open. We did video church for 2 weeks, and I said, this is nonsense. We're not gonna do that. And I use that verse. It's do not forsake the assembling together as some have done, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Yeah, we are watching the day approach.
This is basically, I think, Tom, sorry to interrupt you there, but this is what we're talking about here. This is the church's finest moment. So where we have been frustrated as individuals that have been awakened to the eschatological timeline, and we're understanding Bible prophecy, we've already connected those dots. When we see that these things are there, instead of just pounding people over and over again, you got to see this, you got to see this news, all this news, that's less and less effective right now. I'm beginning to switch my, add in a new component that says, I'm going to encourage you because you're going to need encouragement. So I talk about being faithful, being responsive to the Holy Spirit, work on the sanctification and maturity, work on holiness. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling, essentially.
Amen. Hey, I got a quick question for you. Are you ever available on a Sunday late afternoon, 4 o'clock where you're coming from?
Yeah.
To spend about an hour with me live. Okay, here's the deal. I'm in the book of Daniel. I have Bill Salas coming on in a few weeks. I'm in Daniel chapter 2. We're going to be talking about the right leg and the left leg of the Roman Empire. And then is Antichrist out of the east or west? We're going to go back and forth with that. A few different debates going on. But I also have in Daniel chapter 2 where you have this very strange verse about the seed of men not mingling with the whole thing. You know that verse?
Yes.
I would like to have you back on and work through that as much as possible. I have different ways that I've looked at it over the decades. I'd like to go into some of the things we're talking about a little bit more when we get there, and just kind of work through the process. I have a lot of questions to ask you. I think the people logging on will have some great questions too, but there's so much more as we are rapidly approaching this day. It's like more and more things are making sense, becoming more clear. But yet some things are a little bit stranger because they weren't what we once thought they were. And we can see that now too. So if you're available, I'll shoot you a text and I'll let you know when, and it'd be great. It'll be coming up pretty soon.
That'd be great. Sure.
Okay.
I'm glad to help any way I can.
All right, Scott, this is just it was great having you on today. I'd love to have you on longer. There's a lot of questions here. So it's getting to the point where I have to have every single day I have to have a guest on because there's so much going on. And
yeah, I get it.
And so I'll get you back here as soon as I possibly can. That Sunday night will come up pretty quick too. I'm looking forward to it. You're always such a blessing. Thank you so much. And I know we only got through a few of the things. We only got through a few of them, folks, a few that we were going to talk about today. So thank you so much. I was really, really blessed. Thank you for helping me to understand. Looking forward to next time.
Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate being with you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Hey, listen, on Thursday, I will be with Dennis Swick on his channel TV. He's going to be my co-host, so I hope that you can join me there. And then I know I had something else to say. Oh, yeah, I'll be in Seattle on April 22 with Billy Crone and Eric Barger. I'll be in North Carolina April 28, I'll be there April 28 with Billy Crone and Ken Michael from Jan Markell's ministry. And God bless you, everybody. Oh, by the way, Scott, I have a book that's coming out. I think you knew that, called Marking the Masses. And the cover of the book,
I've ordered, by the way.
You're so kind. And the cover of it was AI, drawn by AI. So, it's just the world we live in. So there you go. There you can see the cover, you guys. There it is. So kind of cool. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and looking forward to seeing you guys real soon. God bless.
Thanks.